Dr. Carmen Smith, and thank you for joining me. And please join the I Am Solution YouTube channel, because that's where I break down spiritual laws, spiritual principles, and I make them easy to understand. In this video, I take everything that I've learned in mental health research, because that's where my background is, in mental health therapy, in court assessments of families. All of that stuff comes together in metaphysics in a way you've probably never heard of before. In this video, I talk about that. I talk about ways that you can practice it, and also connect with the next video, because then I break it down into a personal experience that I had in witnessing. Witnessing is when you actually witness the thoughts that you have, kind of from an observer point of view. And this is a great practice that brings you up higher in the embodiment of spirituality and self-realization. Love you. I'd like to start with my title, which is Rewriting the Individual and Global Narrative. So this has to do with our story, and everybody has a story. Now, I come to you as a therapist, but I started out as a mental health researcher. As a matter of fact, that was my undergrad degree, was mental health research. And what I wanted to research was how we learn and process information. I wanted to find out how we learn to be racist, or how we learn to see people as different, how we learn to hate, how we learn all those things. So I started out wanting to, just very curious about this. And so I did some work at Cornell University on a research project, and my research project at that time, now keep in mind this was in the early 80s, so I reinvented myself several times, and many of you know that, especially if you're over 60 like me. So back then I was at Cornell, and I saw this TV show, and I said, oh my gosh, this is such a destructive TV show. It was called Cops. And I said, I have got to find out, because I have this inner knowing that this is generating a fear of people of color. This is generating hate. And so as I was doing my research and I was trying to uncover why we hate and why we live in such a violent society sometimes, and with the mass shootings, this has come up again. And it's because we are trained at an early age to see that there is a persecutor, a victim, and it generates fear. So if you can see this as a triangle, it's like there has to be like a bad guy, there has to be a victim, a good guy, and then it has to bring out some type of hate or some type of fear. And this is what generates, and when I say generates, it creates an energy. This is, I call it the trifecta of chaos. It's my own. Maybe I should write a book about it, the trifecta of chaos. We're taught at an early age, whether it's video games or story time, that there has to be a villain, a victor, a hero, and then there has to be some conflict because fear is generated. And so you see this, you know, when we're young, and then you watch the news, and there always has to be a villain, somebody that they're victimizing, and out of that comes a fear which generates conflict, struggle, hate, and oftentimes leads to violence. And if we see this in our stories, if we see this in the news, and sometimes we see it in our family because that's what we're exposed to. So-and-so did this. Well, we don't want that, so we have to create this conflict and chaos. And this is something that you can see generated in the world. All you have to do is look at the news or listen to a neighbor talk to you about something. And sure enough, somebody's out to get us. There's the victim. And then there's somebody that's out to get you, and that's the persecutor. And oh, it generates so much fear in us that we need to act, or we need to just think of them as separate. So when I worked for the county, I was a therapist for family services, and I worked with Child Protective Services. So I was a therapist working with the biological parents, with the foster kids that had been exposed to abuse and neglect, and also the foster parents. And I worked with the court, so I had all of these people that were my client. And so a lot of times I would be asked to do a family dynamic or family assessment and present it to the court. And sometimes I would have to be on the stand. And one of the things that I noticed a lot was there was triangulation. There's that triangle again. Triangulation, if you look it up, and in psychology, it means that it's a manipulation in order to create division and chaos. That is what triangulation is. So if you have one parent accusing another parent of something, and then you're asking the court to resolve something, what you've just done is gone into the trifecta of chaos. Whenever you are just so angry or fearful about something and you feel like you're being persecuted, you've created a victim energy, which is the trifecta of chaos. And we are exposed to that, like I said, from an early age. So triangulation is an intentional way to divide people. Once you understand this concept, then you say, well, why would people want to divide the earth? If we're all exposed to these stories, why is it that it's intentional? Because I'm not the only one that knows this. Why would triangulation be a form of communication? And mostly because it's created to divide. And there is a power, like I said, that is generated, chaos, if you divide people. When you're unified, there's a whole different power that is generated, and I want to talk about that. Now, I've talked about it on the global scale. Let's talk about it in the individual scale, because once I saw that years ago, that this is how chaos is generated, I said to myself, well, in metaphysics and in Center for Spiritual Living and Unity, all of these teachings tell us that it starts with us first, and then it generates out. And I'm like, so how do I generate the trifecta of chaos? And I want to say that I know who I am, that I'm a God being, but I'm always curious as a researcher as to what am I thinking? And so I want to always have that observer mind where I'm observing my own thoughts. And years ago, I didn't know there was such a thing. My thoughts were my thoughts. I didn't have an observer out here looking at my thoughts. This comes from practice. And some people use meditation or Tai Chi, but being quiet and you're able to observe your thoughts, and they say like clouds passing by, you begin to develop that observer mind.